This program is part of the Infinite Potato Alliance. Visit us at infinitepotato.com.
Good morning.
Hello.
How's it going?
What's afternoon for us? I'm just now...
What? Already.
Just trying to add one. I'm Shane Thomas and this is Analysing Doctor Who. I'm joined today by Emma Foster, Jan Fennick and Rick Tetrault, who, much like David Tennant, thought he was done with this shit and he's been dragged back to the show one more time. It's the final special episode for the 60th anniversary, and it's definitely a big one. We're going to analyse the Giggle. And if you have any thoughts about what we'll be talking about, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. That's analysing spelt with an S. So, Rick, if we just start with the rating out of 10, please, for this.
11.
Okay, Emma?
10.
Jan?
7.
Okay, I'm also giving it 7. And Jan, if we come to you on what from this you like the most?
What I liked the most was I liked the unit interactions with people. It was really nice seeing Mel again, which is something I never thought in my entire life I would ever say, but it's true. Thrilled to see Bonnie Langford there. Shooty. And Neil Patrick Harris. I thought he was really good as the toy maker.
Okay, Emma, what from this do you like the most?
Yeah, I agree. I think all the guest spots were really great. I think sometimes they can feel a bit shoehorned in, but no, it all flowed really well. And yeah, shooty.
Okay, I come to you, Rick, on that.
I agree with what everyone has said. I love the sense of fun that this episode had. That's something that Doctor Who has been seriously lacking in the past few years. And this was just a joyful, if, serious sometimes, but it was just a joyful romp and fun. And I had a blast watching it.
Yeah, there's plenty I like from this, but if I'm isolating one scene, it's the Stooky Sue and the Babbies scene.
They miss their dear papa, they seek him near and far. They miss their kiss goodnight, they greet in endless night.
I've always thought there's something unsettling and demonic about nursery rhymes, like these songs that we sing to little children, and the puppets themselves are unnerving enough. Like it actually felt in a lot of this episode, much like Wild Blue Yonder, felt very Moffat coded. Like that felt like the kind of thing you get from a Moffat episode. When I was actually thinking about it, like many nursery rhymes, there's usually like a really quite dark, tragic story behind it. And when you actually look at what this puppet is saying, she's talking about the breakup of her family, because that comes back to, the toy makers in the first scene. When Stooky Bill is born, it's like, oh, you wouldn't want to split up the whole family now, would you? And in a weird way, there's almost kind of a retribution, because you're splitting up, I know they're puppets, they're not real, but splitting up a family all in the name of the development of television, all in the development of tech progress. You're stealing the father of a family away to set him on fire so that us human beings can be entertained by television, and this is all happening as we're watching it all on television. There is kind of an extra layer as far as what Russell T Davies I think is doing with that kind of the first 2/3 of the episode. There are some echoes of the Bad Wolf episode, the first Eccleston series, when with the reality TV shows, and he's using TV to commentate on the state of TV at the time. And why I'm highlighting that scene, that's the only scene from the episode that I don't think can be improved upon, from the dialogue to the acting to the filming to how it looked to how it sounded to how it was cut to give everything. I think it was 10 out of 10 on that scene. It's the scene from the episode I've gone back and watched the most. Emma, if I come to you on what from this you like the least?
See, I was sort of struggling a little bit with this because it just was so entertaining. I mean, I'm not sure about, I think the bi-generation, I think obviously we'll talk about it, I expect in depth, but I think that's going to be, here we go, use reference the Americans won't understand, very Marmite-y. It's proved that way so far, quite divisive, ironically, considering what happens. I don't know sort of how I feel about it still. I'm a bit in two minds, so I think I'll lump with that.
Well, obviously we're getting to that, so yeah, maybe we can actually figure that out as we talk further. Jan, what from this did you like the least?
We'll start with the bi-generation, which I'm still like, I knew that was leaked to me. I knew about that a couple weeks ago.
It wasn't for me, but I did understand it had been leaked. So some people did know going in.
Yeah, I like prefaced it by saying that I'm actually a moderator and administrator on Gallifrey Base web forum, and one of the places that I hang out is the spoiler section. And that came out, I think, somewhere from Reddit. So we were aware of it, and I was actually kind of really angry about that whole concept before I even saw it. Having rewatched the episode again last night, it's not quite as bad, but I think that's just the worst part of it to me. Followed by tenant fatigue for me personally. And the other problem is that I think that when the show starts and we get the whole angry people on the street in 2023, I think it's great. But the problem is we start with that, and then we cut to Trinity Wells, we cut to a lot of new stuff, and we never go back to it again. I mean, there's an entire story that I think is there that Russell didn't really touch on. So I feel like it jumps around too much. I wish this episode had been a two-parter, because it just feels like there's too much going on and not enough going on in each part of it. I also think that the toy maker, I mean, Neil Patrick Harris was great, and I really wish we had spent more time on him and more time on the games, not just like a quick game of cards up and then a quick game of catch at the end. I feel like there should have been more. I would have liked more diabolical, something more cerebral, I don't know what, but it felt very rushed for what we got in just an hour. So there were too many things going on.
So Rick, what from this did you like the least? Is there anything, given that you've given this 11?
Like Emma, I'm really hard-pressed to come up with something. I think, the denouement was a bit simplistic, but I didn't not enjoy it. It was kind of refreshing to not have to bend my brain around what the hell's going on. It was just pretty straightforward. The ending thing could have been a little less, oops, I missed. It also kind of has a feeling like it's a setup for something to come. So maybe this is just step one in something that's coming down the line, which I would be totally cool with.
What I like that it is slightly linked to what Jan said. It's the original use of like the galvanic beam, the beam that UNIT has, because the beam's there to take out the KOSAT 5 satellite from South Korea, because apparently that's the thing that's triggered the madness around the world. And they make a huge deal of this. They make a huge deal of, the doctor's given permission, we've got to get the beam, we've got to line it up right and destroy the satellite. And they destroy the satellite, and there's a big cheering when they take it down, and the doctor immediately walks in and is like, yeah, okay, so forget about that, it's just a link in the chain. And Donna's got to create a template to sync together like all the satellites and all the tech around the Earth, because she's really good at typing. And yes, that's consistent. But I don't think that means that she's become a scientific genius, given that she's not the Dr. Donna anymore. I felt it was just a way to explain, and this is what comes back to Jan's point, explain that the giggle in everyone's head is now gone. That's why at the end of the episode, everything's fine. Humanity's not tearing itself apart anymore because we destroyed the satellite. And Donna did the thing that Donna did. They kind of hand wave that quite a lot for something that in the first 25 minutes felt like the massive thing that had to be dealt with. And it's like, yeah, we fired a laser at it, but apparently we've got to do this other thing so we can get to the stuff that maybe Russell really wanted to get to, and we could explain that way at the end. So it's a kind of thing that, watching the episode, I didn't really think about it, but you rewatch it and think about that for like 10 seconds, you're like, yeah, that wasn't very good. But that was arguably where maybe if it had been a two-parter, you wouldn't have blasted through that so quickly.
You have the cliffhanger from the week before, which is, on the street and people carrying on and just, destruction. And we spend so little time on that. And like you said, they rush through kind of like fixing the satellite. And I personally type 100 words a minute, or I used to. I could not have fixed satellites the way Donna did. So I think there is a vestige of the Dr. Donna there, but it was nice to have heard that or commented on it. And then we suddenly rush into the Toymaker thing. And I think the Toymaker that whole thing could have been a whole separate episode. So it kind of goes way too fast for me. And I wish Russell had gotten 4 stories instead of 3, or had done something differently.
Yeah, so this doesn't ruin the episode, but these are things that mean the episode doesn't hold together as well as it could, even though, for the record, I like the episode a lot. And one of the big things from the episode, Jan, we come to you, this is the Toymaker. You briefly mentioned Neil Patrick Harris already. New version of this character. So if we just come to like your takes on the Toymaker in this.
I really liked him. I thought that he was good. I thought that he was menacing when he needed to be. I'd like to take on it because obviously there's a lot of baggage that goes with this episode that most people haven't even seen in terms of racism and this and that. I know Russell did say that one of the reasons that he gave him this sort of cod off German accent was to push the fact that he is, as much as a celestial being can be, a racist. He's still kind of racist. So that's why he made him German, which of course set off German fans, and they're not happy about it. I like the fact that he did actually switch through nationalities. He was kind of playing with stuff. And Neil Patrick Harris is a magician. I know he's been a magician since he was a kid. So, watching him do the juggling, the card tricks, I think that was actually him. So I thought that worked really well and it fit. And he was having a blast. It felt like he was really having a good time. And he was really enjoying being the character, and I liked his interactions with Tennant. I thought they had really good rapport there. I felt like he was a good villain, or had he been given more time, he was a good villain. I mean, just the times that he was on screen and doing stuff was great. About the only thing I could have lived without was the Russell, repeating himself by having yet another dance / lip sync by the villain, because that just felt like it lasted the Time Lord, but Neil Patrick Harris has won Tony Award-winning Broadway star, so it works in that way. And it was fun. And as much as he's been banished from this realm forever, I would love to see a loophole. I would not have a problem with him coming back.
I would be very surprised if we don't see some version of this character again. I mean, to clear up or to confirm some of this stuff you mentioned around the character, and this is the really sad thing, and it's a pity because I understand in America you're not getting these extras stuff that we're getting over here.
No, we're not.
You're getting some bits on YouTube and on social, which we are getting over here, but we're getting extra stuff. So some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, we're getting programs, behind-the-scenes programs, and we didn't for Wild Blue Yonder, but for the Star Beast and this, we got a whole episode commentary with some of the people who worked on it, and they give you so much genuinely interesting information, whether you like the episode or not, of how it was all put together. The original Toymaker, played by Michael Gough, who was Alfred in the first 4 Batman films.
Oh, okay.
The 2 Michael Keaton ones, the Val Kilmer one, and the George Clooney one. Same actor. I mean, just look at what he's wearing. It's just like, why is a white man wearing this? Even the term celestial, I didn't realise at the time, actually, in the past, in some areas, was used as a derogatory term for East Asian people. Because he was known as the Celestial Toymaker. And there is a reference of We Can Be Celestial that Tennant uses in this. But that's partly where the German accent comes from. But also, there is a line in the first scene where John Logie Baird's assistant, Charles Banerjee, buys Stooky Bill. It's raining outside, and it's the moment when the accent deliberately slips, where he says to the guy, "Team, you must be used to warmer climes," and he gives him a look. And then the response is, "I was born in Cheltenham." Charles Banerjee's played by a South Asian man. So there is just a little undercurrent of racism just thrown in there. So, Em, if we come to you and the Toymaker, anything else to add?
Like I say, going back to the old series, I didn't mind the games bit. I mean, it's a bit more dynamic than the original one where you got the bloody endless shots and then playing the Trilogic game. For me, it was really sort of giving Pennywise the newer versions of it. Some of the dance moves were very there. I mean, I did enjoy it. It was just so unhinged. I was so into it. Neil Patrick Harris was saying on the behind the scenes stuff where he was saying that Spice Up Your Life was unknown to him, but British people know it like it's Happy Birthday, which is true. It did make me just hoot. I know it's the same gag as Sacha Dhawan doing Rasputin, and I enjoyed the hell out of it, and I can't lie. And I've watched that bit several times, and especially the bit where he's on the phone and he turns to Shirley's character. Oh, mate, it just makes me giggle every time. I'm such a mark for that stuff. I thought that sort of being given this very strange brief, I think, on this character, he knocked it out of the park. I can't really ask him to do much more than what he did. So, I really enjoyed it.
And anything else to add, Rick?
I agree. I love NPH anyway, and watching him just munch on the scenery the way he did was a joy.
Yeah, I thought he was actually very good. As Emma said, it is a motif now. The villain lip-syncing 2 a.m. pop song in a moment of triumph for them. This did feel like it leveled up, partly because they've got the facilities to do that now. This did feel more expansive than what Sacha Dhawan did than what John Sim did. It was a whole performance, and it does seem to be the scene from this episode more than any other, bar maybe the Bi-Generation, that I think has the most fuel in it. I've seen that go around a lot. I think if you type in Spice Up Your Life into Google or YouTube, and I think the second autofill is Doctor Who, right now.
I'd say as well, the scene with the puppets, where he says, well, that's all right then.
He met eine friend called Amy Pond, and he loved Amy Pond. And they went to and fro in time and space. But Amy Pond was touched by the weeping angel. She died. She died of old age.
Well, that's all right then.
And then He was meeting Clara. But she was killed by a bird.
She still survives in her last second of life.
Well, that's all right then. But then the doctor met Bill. But she was killed by the Cybermen.
But her consciousness survives.
Oh, well, that's all right then.
Because it's been memed into another planet
That
now.
has been memed to death already. Jesus Christ, yeah.
It's caught on with people outside of the nerd sphere, if you like. I mean, I've seen it in the wild outside of people I would expect to have heard of it, if you see what I mean. So really caught on. And when things catch on like that, fortunately or unfortunately, it's sort of the key to success these days of sort of catching on with like your TikTokers and things. If you can sort of get people intrigued as to where does this come from, and then they go and watch it, that is all the more power to you these days.
Yeah, I don't think that's a plan. I don't think you can plan for something to become a meme.
I know you can't force it. These things happen or they don't.
Yeah, they're organic, but no, I think that's very much a net positive, and Russell in particular will see that as a net positive for the reasons you just stated. Also with like Neil Patrick Harris, he's perfect casting for the character as written like this. I think other writers' versions of the Toymaker, I don't think Neil Patrick Harris probably works, but because he's mischievous and camp rather than menacing. But he always came off as this person is going to be a pain in the ass, and that's what he is to the doc and to everyone. He's a constant thorn in people's side. I mean, I didn't think of the Pennywise comparison, Emma, but you say I think how Bill Skarsgård played it, and I mean maybe there was some inspiration there. Even though those It films are obviously a lot more, they are not for kids. There is some comparison because what the Toymaker doesn't directly. He does actually kill the 14th Doctor, but he doesn't kind of brutalize anyone. He just fucks with your mind repeatedly, and it almost weakens you. It exhausts you into position where you'll play his game just to try and get some peace. But because you've already been mentally degraded, you're more likely to lose. Like, I always wonder if there's not an episode, but like if Disney Plus need extra content, like a mini-sode to see the Master play that game with the Toymaker that ends up with the Master turning into a gold tooth.
The Master was dying and begged for his life with one final game, and when he lost, I sealed him for all eternity inside my gold tooth.
There may be like a 10-minute mini-sode then where Sacha Darwin and Neil Patrick Harris go against each other, and the Master's desperate in the last few seconds of their life, so it's like, well, we'll play, and if I win, I get to survive. I get unlimited regenerations or something like that.
I'd pay to see it.
There is something potentially there, just to see what the Toymaker does, because the Toymaker breaks people down. I mean, the Charles Banerjee character, when you see him against the puppet, I think the performance is actually really good, because you see someone who was broken mentally first. I think like Neil Patrick Harris and Russell T clearly knows how to write for him. I mean, ironically, for someone who is quite a beloved person, I always think that he's actually very good at playing sinister. And this Toymaker, again, is not like menacing, but is sinister, because I think of Neil Patrick Harris and I think of, I mean, his character in How I Met Your Mother obviously wasn't a nice guy, but even his character, more importantly, in Gone Girl, where he is a vile piece of work in that film. So he has that as a performer, he has that in him, and I think definitely Russell T leaned into that as far as how he wrote the character, but never failing to make him incredibly camp, which you've got Neil Patrick Harris, so yes, write him that way. Where this character fits in those realms of a villain that, in some ways, the villain is more fun than the hero. Even if you want the hero to win, you're actually having fun watching this villain. So, the Spice Up For Your Life lip-syncing scene. That scene, and I'm not a fan of the Spice Girls at all, and I don't like that song, but that scene was incredibly fun to watch. How it was used here is perfect. Perfect use of that song with that actor, with that scene. Russell did have... See, these are the great insights. I find this a very interesting insight, whether you agree or not. These are the great insights that you can get with some of the extra stuff. Where Russell has and this is why he used the Scissor Sisters song in Last of the Time Lords. He thinks there is something... He spoke about pop music. He's trying to find the right word for it. So there's something relentless and almost punishing about it. And it almost batters you into submission. And that's why he didn't obviously do it with the way Chibnall did it, even though Chibnall I think used it in the same way with the power of the Doctor. He's picking that kind of pop music because he says there is something relentless about it, and that is why it does fit the villain having that, because it is almost like another weapon in the villain's arsenal. At that moment, none of our heroes are enjoying the song. It's very much, can someone fucking turn that off? and the villain's like, no, I'm torturing you with this. And yeah, Neil Patrick Harris, I think, is just a perfect fit. I don't know his screen time is that much. I think he left a really good impression. I found him very effective. I definitely think there's scope to see him again. The only thing I think stops him us ever seeing him again, because yes, it's like comic books, no one dies, no one's gone forever. The only thing I think could stop this happening is if there's some kind of personal falling out, or Neil Patrick Harris just asked for too much money. So if we move on to what I imagine will take up the bulk of this pod, I've entitled this The 14th Doctor / The Bi-Generation / Shoot You Motherfucking Gatwa. And we will just dig through this, and we can go where we will go with this, because I couldn't leave any of this out, and there's just so much to get through here. Emma, I'll come to you first, because do you remember what your post-episode tweet was?
No, go on then, tell me. I can't bloody remember.
You basically tweeted, Russell, what have you done?
Yes.
Which can be taken in a number of different ways, but I think sums up where we are.
Tell you what, isn't it funny how, I mean, when we were speaking about Star Beach the other day, and I thought, wow, Russell really watched these Marvel films and went, yeah, let's do that. Because I can't get it out of my head that essentially we've got Kate Stewart now as Nick Fury assembling the Avengers, which is the old companions. And then we've got a bi-generation where basically got the Endgame ending of Captain America giving the mantle over to a young black man, giving the hero mantle. We've got old David Tennant giving the mantle to Shooty Gatwa. And I was like, hold on a minute. I've seen this before. It was Avengers Endgame. When I first saw it, I mean, because again, Jeremy, you say you're a moderator of Gallifrey Base. I expect that you would like basically just got a flamethrower next to your server tower of your computer. Like, oh God, I'm going to have to quarantine this place. It's going to be terrible. I don't hate it as a concept in theory. If you sort of take in what we've had from all the episodes so far about the act of like doing the sorting while Blue Yonder has meant that myths and legends have sort of become reality. So that's why the Toymaker is now in our realm. That's when the Toymaker is put in the box. Kate says, seal it in salt, because obviously that myth is now a factual thing in the world because the Doctor put it out there. I wish there'd been like an extra line where, you know, the bi-generations happen because, again, myths and legends are now real because I changed the fabric of reality an episode ago. That's why this is happening. I sort of wish there was a bit more of throw us a couple more bones in there. The other thing I don't kind of like about it is that it feels like Russell is basically writing fan fiction of his own era.
Thank you.
I brought this up at the last episode because it sort of feels like Russell's gone, I've had 15 years to think about the ending of where Donna is. And I don't know if I'm on my own here, but I really don't dislike the original Donna ending. It's brutal, but it works so beautifully. And it's what the story does. And it's so perfect because it's so sad. And while I don't dislike the Doctor's got a happy ending and Donna's got a happy ending and we've got all our family here and he can finally rest, all the trauma is now kind of just dumped into him. And he can figure it out. And then we've got this beautiful, lovely 15th Doctor off to go and have mega adventures. And I'm all for it. But, you know, because I looked at all these tweets at all these people who were like 8 when Series 4 ended. And like, you know, Russell's healed my trauma, 15 years of being sad about this. And I was like, dude, you know, I mean, I'm not taking it away from you guys. And I understand that, you know, mega traumatized as a kid by seeing this. I don't think it's something that needed to be fixed. It was a very sad ending, but it was a great ending. Big Finish are rubbing their hands with glee at this because they've got a million box sets ready to be written for these guys. I don't hate that concept. And, you know, obviously the headcanon that's coming in with this is the incarnation that goes on to that we see as the curator in the 50th anniversary. You know, I love all that. That's great. But I really don't think it was something that he had to fix. I'm not taking away from it. I enjoyed it. You know, I popped off huge for that ending. I was like, loved all the stuff in the TARDIS and in another TARDIS and you could go and be happy and, you know, great. But it's not necessary. You didn't fuck up Series 4. Series 4 ended great. You know, admittedly, I was in my 20s when I saw that. I didn't think that Uncle Rusty needed to fix the 8-year-old children from back then. They're okay. We've got bigger fish to fry, you know what I mean? So, although, again, I'm not hating, I enjoyed the episode. I just gave it a 10. Doctor Who is a deeply unserious program. It's meant to be fun. And, you know, people get way too emotionally invested in something that's silly and, you know, meant to be entertainment and all this sort of thing. I think that, unfortunately, with Bi-Generation is I'll accept nearly anything with Doctor Who because, it's just a fundamentally just silly show about a bloke knocking around in a magic spaceship. But I think it could have used some more dialogue. I think they cut a bit more dialogue to just give it a bit more explanation. And I think that this thing that the comments that Russell's made in the commentary about that he thinks this is how all generations go, I think should be emphasised. That is the man's headcanon. I know that he's in charge of Doctor Who, but that wasn't in the actual episode. That's not in the dialogue. It's not the canon as we know it. That's what he thinks happens. I don't think it retrospectively ruins, like the 12th Doctor ending or the 11th Doctor ending or that sort of thing. He thinks that. You don't have to think that. The only bi-generation that we've seen on the screen is that one, and there's no reason to think that it's ever going to happen again. I've been talking for like 5 minutes, someone else talk.
I was going to say, now I know what it sounds like when I go off on a Star Trek tangent.
Jan, if I bring you in on this now.
I think that Russell is very, very, his ability of unconscious bias has happened before. I mean, I was a huge Martha fan, and then we went through an entire series of series 3, where Martha was not as good as Rose, and she kept being reminded she wasn't as good as Rose, and this and that and the other thing. And then, of course, we get to the end of Journey's End, and Rose gets her own doctor and she gets the happy ending. Well, now, this time, Donna gets the happy ending and she gets her own doctor, and Martha's not even mentioned in this. So when you have your first black, first queer doctor that should be getting the spotlight, that should be like the focus, which of course he is, and Shudigatwa is an amazing actor, and I'm thrilled that most people are giving him a chance. It just felt like immediately it was diminishing, and Russell was not thinking again of how this was going to come off to people who weren't him. And I mean, Russell is like 6 months younger than I am. I think there were times where he just doesn't think about the message that this may be giving out to people who are not like him, and I was very incensed about it. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing on a lot of social media, and people are seeing him, unfortunately seeing 15 as a clone. He's like the inferior, byproduct of the real Doctor, who's David Tennant. We've been hearing about this since 2009, 2010, that he's the only real true Doctor and nobody else counts. People talk about the new series and Christmas and all that, which is great. And then you've got too many people coming in again and saying, oh, but when is the spin-off series with David Tennant and the real Doctor and Donna happening? He's not just going to sit there in her back garden and, drink tea with the family. He's going to go off and have adventures and this and that. And I feel like Russell diluted things. I mean, I think part of it may be a rights issue again. The BBC may be protecting themselves and saying, this is the original Doctor, this is the real thing. And if and when the Disney contracts go south, which hopefully they won't, but at some point if Disney decides to opt out again, then they can say, well, that was an offshoot. This is a different Doctor. That's the Disney Doctor, and we can go back to this thing. And it just really bothers me because I'm old school. I mean, I started watching Doctor Who in 1978. My first Doctor was Tom Baker. I'm old school enough that I like having a line through a progression. And it bothers me that now we don't have that. We suddenly have two Doctors existing at the same time. And not only that, I mean, I think if the 14th Doctor had suddenly not had powers, or there was something about eventually I will grow old and die like my friends, that he did not have a TARDIS, or at least the TARDIS was limited, that there was some limits put on him, and we knew that it was a finite ending, I would have been better about it. But unfortunately, it feels like we've got two Doctors operating at the same time. There's probably a setup for a unit series and or a 14th Doctor series. And it bothers me because I don't think the Doctor, whether you like them or not, whether you're, a fan, a lot of people weren't a fan of Jodie, and I kind of came and went on the 13th Doctor, but I respected her, and she was the Doctor, and she was the only Doctor. And I think of like, my God, what would have happened if we had Capaldi off with, somebody sitting in their back garden while Jodie was off having her adventures. And I just don't think that's the best idea. I know Russell is trying to have his cake and eat it too, and he wants to have this Marvel-style universe where, there are all these other things going on. And even if you love your Doctor, I mean, like, I'm a huge Matt Smith fan. The thing is that he did die, and he had a sacrifice, and he had a good life, and a brilliant, brilliant speech by Moffat. And now that feels like that's undone. The fifth Doctor dying, sacrificing himself for Perry. Now that's been undone. And that bothers me because it's like, no, don't undo other people's stuff. Don't take this drama away from what's there. One of the things about Doctor Who, and kids should be learning this. I mean, it's an important lesson to know that people die, that you lose people in your life, and you have to go on and things change. It's not always going to be static and the same. And now Russell kind of saying, well, no, nobody went. They're all out there at the same time doing things. And I mean, granted, I know this is his way of explaining, if he wants to pull Peter Davison in to do a miniseries, he doesn't have to explain why he's old, because apparently, he didn't die, he just kept on going. And That annoys me because I feel like there's ways of doing the multiverse and there's ways of doing stories that don't really need that much explanation without just undoing all the series or all the shows the last 59 years because Russell has it in his head that everybody lives, and we mean everybody now. That's dramatic license. That's what writers do. But for me, I need some kind of internal logic. I want to know how this works and not be have it so open-ended and changing all the time that I'm apoplectic about this. Welcome to my TED Talk. Thank you.
Rick, I'll come back to something you said in a minute on a previous pod about canon, Rick. But if I bring you in on all this obviously stuff that's happened.
Okay, I had no idea of any of the stuff that Davies had said about the bi-generation. So I'm just coming at this from the standpoint of the show, of what was aired. I got a kick out of it. I decided when we saw Tennant regenerate from Jodie that all bets were off, that this was some sort of special case, and I was along for the ride. When Davies left the first time, I was ready for him to go. I never liked the sexual tension between the companions and the doctor and the doctors, and I admitted to my hypocrisy when it looked like Yaz and 13 were going to get together, but then they didn't. But when David Tennant came out of the TARDIS and he's like, why is this face back? I had already kind of segmented what was coming off as a special, because a lot of times the specials don't really fit in with the main stories. So I was kind of looking at this like, flying sharks or snowman or whatever. And so most of what they did in these, I was cool with it. The Star Beast was a little muddled, but I really enjoyed, what was the second one called?
Wild Blue Yonder.
Wild Blue Yonder.
Especially because, there were only two people in it for the most part, and it was really well done. But it became very clear that this series were the Doctor excising his demons. So when they did the bi-generation, at first I was like, WTF, what's happening here? But then, I was like, all right, well, this is happening. I can either rail against it because it's never happened, or I can just go with it. And even they were like, what the hell's going on? This has never happened before.
Well, someone tell me what the hell is going on here?
Excuse me, sorry, but how did that happen?
Bi-generation. I have bi-generated. There's no such thing. Bi-generation is supposed to be a myth, but look at me.
Which is what I'm going by. And again, my perspective is, straight white American dude. But I didn't see this as diminishing Ncuti at all. In fact, he immediately took control. And I was a little worried about him playing the Doctor, only because I really had seen pictures of him. I was worried that he was going to be too serious. I don't know where that came from, but I just had this, I guess most of the pictures I saw of him were just portrait type stuff. So he was just, unsmiling, whatever. And within 10 seconds, I was like, he's the Doctor. I'm totally on board with him. And I enjoyed watching them play off of each other.
Now, you two, if you don't mind, there is a great big universe out there, Colin, and I've got to get going. So off you pop, old man.
Oh, you're the old man. You're older than me.
Actually, that is true. He's younger because you came after him, so you're the older Doctor.
Okay, kid. I love you. Get out.
I'm so looking forward to what's to come. I didn't mind the handoff of having them both there. And the fact that, as I'm interpreting it, David Tennant's Doctor has butted off and taken all the angst and the sorrow and the misery with him to work it out as 14. Is Ncuti 14?
No, Ncuti's 15.
15. I don't do math. He said, we go to therapy out of order, or however he put that. So I don't mind that there's a second Doctor sitting in a telling eyebrow stories at the dinner table in a garden and wherever they are. I think it's fine. Doctor Who has always been willing to just kind of do what they want. The word canon barely applies to this show. And I'm talking to you as a rabid Star Trek fan. Canon in Doctor Who is a very tenuous thing. I understand it because I have been a canonista, finally learned to unclench a little bit on Trek canon. But it seems to me holding too tightly to Doctor Who canon is kind of like trying to hang on to an icicle made of oil, because they retcon at a heartbeat. They always have. And yet people lose their shit every time it happens. And if you go back before New Who, there was no consistency. They just did what they wanted to do. And, if they needed to throw, why is the master disintegrating? 12 regenerate. All right, good. Let's go with that. That was about as much thought as got put into anything, because it was more about telling the stories and having fun. And that's what I loved about this episode. It didn't take itself too seriously. I mean, there was some, where are my people? Oh, I think they're still falling. That was not nice, but it was funny. I hope this is where we're going. I hope we're going to get to have some fun again with Doctor Who. I loved Jodie Whittaker's Doctor. I can't say the same about her time on the show because it was so damn serious for the most part. There was a sense of play, but, in this episode that I think had been sorely lacking. So when we got 2 doctors for the price of 1, I enjoyed it. The fact that they just kind of said what the Doctor did at the edge of the universe created some changes, I didn't quite catch that, but it gives a reason. And for me, as long as there is an attempt at, some sort of reason, why does this suddenly happen now? Because X led to Y. It doesn't have to make sense because, we're talking about, like you said, it's a science fantasy show. It's a show where a guy travels through time in a blue box, and so they can do whatever they want. I liked the bi-generation. I like that we have David Tennant around. I've also learned over the past 10 years that I enjoy being pandered to. So bring it on. I'm here for it.
The idea of rigid canon in a show like Doctor Who is almost like the shortest path to like a dead end. It's always been added onto. It's always been, and now this, and now this, and now this. So the Sonic Screwdriver wasn't canon. The Psychic Paper wasn't canon. So I've never, ever bought into, you can't do this, with maybe the odd exception, but generally you can't do this. So I wasn't spoiled. So I wasn't expecting that. I was like, oh, what's going on? But as far as my basic feelings in the bi-generation, I don't like the bi-generation. I don't not like the bi-generation. It doesn't mean anything in and of itself because we don't know what they're going to do with it. It all comes down to execution. The idea that every Doctor that had passed is now awake again and maybe existing again. I feel confident that we're not all of a sudden going to get Shoot You an Adventure and then Peter Capaldi is going to pop his head around the corner. And the idea of multiple Doctors are existing has always been the case. The 16th Doctor exists in this show. The 17th Doctor exists in this show. We don't know who that person is, but that person exists in the world of the show because there is no straight timeline. The multiple Doctors have always existed, and there's always been, in theory, the potentiality that this week the Doctor might land somewhere and another Doctor's already there, or another Doctor also shows up. That could happen every week on the show, and that could always have happened every week on the show going back to 1963. That obviously is not the case because there are logistical reasons. I'm not wasting our budget on 2 big actors, but the fact is, in theory, you always could. So, as far as what this means for the show, I'm not sure, and maybe it will change some things materially. We will see, and I'll have my opinions, when I actually see what I have to have an opinion on. But right now, it doesn't actually change anything. As far as we know, Ncuti will be the Doctor on our TVs on Christmas, and then for, is it 8 weeks or 10 weeks?
8 weeks.
I think it's 8.
It's 8 and another Christmas.
Yeah, 8 and Christmas. Yeah, so for 8 weeks, that's the Doctor. And Millie Gibson's a companion. And those are the people we'll be seeing every week.
One part of what's made the online discourse kind of so, I don't want to say toxic, that's mean, but so difficult to wade through is that Doctor Who is such a fractured fan base, and there's a hell of a lot of people who are just David Tennant fans and just Peter Capaldi fans and just Matt Smith fans who are still in the discourse, who, for some reason or other, despite the fact that they hate it, are still watching the show. And the amount of tweets that I was wading through of he's coming back, Matt Smith's coming back, Peter Capaldi's coming back, and then they got disappointed about something that they made up and was never happening in the first place. That was a big thing about Wild Blue Yonder at the time because it was shrouded in secrecy. And the amount of online discourse that was, like I say, Twitter was unusable in terms of Doctor Who, just trying to read an opinion or, just what, your favourite kind of commentator thought about it. Because it was just full of people who were just Peter Capaldi fans, who were just David Tennant fans, just Matt Smith fans, who were disappointed because their own headcanon hadn't turned up in the show or that they hadn't turned up in the show at all. And it's like, dude, you just need to get over it because this is all the Matt Smith there is. But if you're just a fan of that, then cool, go be a fan of that. because Doctor Who is moving on. And unfortunately, I think a bit of the problem with David Tennant coming back is now they're all like, well, maybe then they can come back, and then I can just blow hot air into the internet, being disappointed and saying this is shit, that shit, because your favourite isn't coming back, you know, and may never come back, or you're going to have to wait another 15 years. The online discourse has been like, I was going to say, again, being a football enjoyer, the fight between the worst takes I've ever read in my life between football Twitter and Doctor Who Twitter at the moment. Like, I'm reading tweets alternatively between Doctor Who and the NFL Twitter, and like my jaw is just dropping further and further, like bloody David Tennant while Blue Yonder.
The things that I disliked about Russell before, towards the end, were very glaringly obvious this time too, including literally, instead of a Deus Ex Machina ending, we got the Deus Ex Deus ending. I mean, basically, we pulled the god out of a god.
Yeah, hasn't helped. We've had such a long, ramp up to this episode. We've been waiting like 18 months again for this, it feels like. And I said, in a pod that we did when this was all being announced and Russell was coming back and stuff, I remember saying that my main thing was, watching the jubilation spread across Twitter and thinking, lot of you motherfuckers are forgetting about the end of time and other things that we sat through. Because like Rick, by the time we got to that arse end of his tenure, I was ready for him to go. I thought, God bless you, Rusty. You gave it everything, but it's time to hitch your wagon and move on to the next thing. I think that you're going to get that plus more. I think that the fact that he's had some success doing exactly what he bloody wants is only going to make him, he's right. And he's right. He's won. He's successful doing exactly what he wanted to do, writing exactly what he wanted to write. So why would he change?
Okay, so the idea of certain fans reacting the way certain fans have reacted, I personally don't really care, because they don't get to write the show. My analysis of the episode and how I feel about the episode isn't related to those people at all. They're entitled to think what they want to think. I don't have to agree, and I don't even have to listen. Ultimately, that doesn't have any impact on what we saw. I mean, that's kind of why I'm more with Rick. Like, the racist fans are going to be there. Same way the misogynist fans were when Jodie was pilot in the TARDIS. They were there the second he was announced. They're going to be there when he's on the TV every week. Ultimately, I don't care about them unless something happens that forces me to, because they're going to be there anyway. The Tennant stands are going to be there anyway. Davis has kind of said more than once, I definitely don't think we may never, ever see Tennant again in some form. Clearly the door, it's not open, but the door's been shut, the door's not been locked. But I don't think that all of a sudden now we're summoning him to show up in the show at the expense of the other Doctor. And an interesting Russell did say on the commentary that I haven't seen anyone pick up on was the idea of these anniversary episodes. He's not bound up in nostalgia, curiously enough. Even though these episodes aspects of them feel very Russell, he's not repeating, photocopying Doctor Who stuff that we're used to at all. First, you can see him making profound changes to the nature of the show. But another aspect that might be significant, and I think we'll see, I haven't reached a conclusion on this, I want to watch more of it first, was his view on death may have changed. While I actually agree with Jan that there is, like, I love a regeneration episode, or a regeneration rather than the episode. I always find those moments really, really gripping, because it is both a death and a birth at the same time, and a ending and a beginning. You don't have to change how you felt about them, because they still happened. Ultimately, I don't think we're going to see Doctors rising from the dead, partly because some of them are just too old to be on screen, and some of them are dead, so that's not changing.
Yeah.
But he himself may have changed view on death, because if we remember, and like you, Rick, when he left and when Tennant left, I don't look back on that tenure negatively. But there are these things go in cycles, and I think they'd reached the end of their cycle and it was time for them both to go. Now, if we remember those Tennant episodes, particularly the two-part End of Time, there was a very funereal, maudlin feel to them. I mean, I don't know, Emma, you'll probably know best out of all of us, but Rick, you and Jan might know. I don't think the Doctor had ever spoken of coming to the end as using the word dying. Like, Tennant says, I'm going to die.
I don't think he did.
No, not really. It's... Again, there's a bit in one of Peter Capaldi's episodes, I think it might be Heaven Sent, where he says dying is like Time Lord man flu. It's like not a problem. David Tennant's dragging himself around going, I'm going to die. Like, oh, mate, please. Everyone else has been fine with it.
He was acting like a person with a terminal illness. That's how that was written.
It's interesting in a way that now he's got this totally different viewpoint on it where now nobody dies, everybody lives. Part of it may be, I know he lost his partner had brain cancer, and he went through a very, very...
This is the point I was going to make.
Yeah.
He now, because of real world tragedy, has not direct experience, but kind of, I don't know what the sideways experience with a terminal illness, because his husband died of a terminal illness. And that's why he came back from America initially. The whole move to America, and part why Torture Miracle Day was so terrible, because he had to drop out of the project entirely, because the real world really intruded on that. So he may now have a very different view on death in fiction. This is just speculation. He hasn't addressed this, and he shouldn't have to, by the way, because I'm sure it's a very sensitive spot for him for obvious reasons. But he may now have a different approach to the end, which may in turn part explain his issue as far as By Generation goes. One thing, because Emma's actually got to go soon, if we just come to just your additional observations of your MVP, and then we'll finish the rest of the show.
Ultimately, really enjoyed this. I think that... I'm really excited to see Shooty go on and take this program into new places. I love his energy. Just this 15 minutes we had with him in the final act, I really thought it was awesome. I thought that they're going to get overlooked, but love Gemma Redgrave, love Bonnie Langford, all those guys, Ruth Madeley, all those guys really were great, and optimistic as well. I think they're going to be in the new series as well, so I'm super excited to see more of them as working it into what's happening. I like that, with all the problems with the Bi-Generation, they've drawn a line under a lot of the garbage that 14 was carrying around with him, the emotional weight that was on him, and kind of this new, freer Doctor is now out there. He's sort of ready to kind of start afresh, if you see what I mean, truly, which really works for me. So it's great. I mean, all that stuff's still in him, all the Timeless Child stuff, it's all going to be a part of him, but it's going on with an optimistic view to the future, which I think has sort of been sorely lacking. And again, like you guys were saying, a sense of fun being back, which I've said enough of the Chibnall era. The one of the main problems with it was that it took itself very seriously and did forget to be fun on occasion. Ultimately, for all going on a big whinge about it, it doesn't bother me to the degree that I'm out and not sold on the 15th Doctor. I'm super excited to see him going forward. Long may it continue. I hope that he has a long run on it, and I'm glad that they're getting a long run into the production as well. It means that they can do other projects and, take advantage of being a big name right now and get into bigger roles. And it means that they've got time to do the VFX properly or work out these scripts and get the guest artists that they want and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I'm very excited about the direction that it's going in, despite some of my reservations about the Bi-Generation.
And who's your MVP of the episode?
Goodness, if this is so difficult.
I found this very tough.
Because I think that I could almost say anyone in the show, apart from the bloke that you see for 2 minutes on top of the laser beam thing. I think I'm sort of tempted to say NPH, as much as I want to say Shooty or David Tennant or Catherine Tate, because they say they're all kind of 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. He was just so magnetic and given a tremendously difficult brief, I think, really, to do this character. And I'm sure Russell said, I think when you watch behind the scenes stuff with MPH, it was a case of they said, right, okay, so here's what we want you to do. You know how to jump, you can dance, you can do all that stuff, to figure it out. And he was like, okay.
This has been an unbelievably exciting and exhausting role. Filming it has been crazy. I am being asked to do things that I have done in the past, but never simultaneously. It's been voracious, and I picture it as a giant sandbox filled with quicksand. I'm sinking, and I'm playing. I'm not sure in what degree.
It could have really bombed, and it worked super well. He straddles that line between when the Master is at his scariest, really darkly humorous, and the genuinely scary sort of thing of being like a true kind of, basically like an eldritch abomination who just doesn't give a shit about any sort of human life or, reasonable discourse or anything. He's just there to just be a pure agent of chaos and mayhem, and I'm glad that he's then sort of been put in a box and we can get him out to play with later. I hope he doesn't get too overused or, gets come back and he kind of gets a bit rinsed out like the Master does sometimes. And I can't tell you the pop that me and Chuck did when they had that thing of the tooth being picked up. like the callback to the ring being picked up at the end of Last of the Time Lords, I like basically yelled the house down, and like my daughter and Abby had fallen asleep and I hadn't realised, so because my mum was there and like me and Chuck were going, oh shit, and my mum was like, oh, quiet, the baby's asleep. I was like, oh god, it's like we just had completely forgotten about my actual child in terms. Instead of looking at bloody Doctor Who, which is, another example of my excellent parenting. Yeah, it was just like full of like punchy air stuff like that, and I can't take away from it. It's like a purely entertainment experience. It was really top notch.
And I think he underestimated how grueling the job would be until he was doing it. He was always very good humoured in his interviews, but you looked at him just like, oh, you're so tired right now, aren't you? You're going to 2 hours sleep.
They recorded this obviously in summer of 22.
It was boiling.
Where here in the UK we had the worst heat wave we've ever had. It was over 40 degrees, so over 100 and was 110 on some days, which is very, very, very hot for here. Wearing all that makeup, all his like posh clothes. At least he got to do this in his pants because it was so hot. So you can see they're all suffering because it's so unbelievably uncomfortable to film. And obviously then you're under huge lights on a big set. I wouldn't want to be playing very energetic catch for hours and hours in those circumstances. Yeah, he looks like he wanted to lay down and a cold drink, bless him. I hope he knows how worth it was because he crushed it. Basically, Russell has gone copy-pasted Endgame for this episode. I wonder if there's going to be much more Marvel crossover influence that we see in the new series going forward, because it just made me laugh to think that he's basically took the Captain America ending.
Okay, Rick has to finish up soon as well. Was there anything else you want to add?
I think I've emptied my brain on this. I'm sure there's other stuff I've forgotten, but yeah, I'm pretty happy there. Okay, well, if we basically just move ahead to Rick, if you move ahead to any observations you want to make and your MVP as well.
The only thing we haven't touched on, I think, is while I've enjoyed the last 2 episodes' usage of it, I hope we're done with corridors of doors for a while. I was expecting to see a Great Dane and a really stone dude wandering through some of those doors. Also, when Shooty mentioned Sarah Jane is gone, it was like the knife through the heart.
All the people we lost. Sarah Jane has gone. Can you believe that for a second? I loved her. I loved her.
Don't want them to ever say that again. We know it. No, otherwise, like I said, I really enjoyed this episode. I loved the sense of play. Yeah, it got a little what the hell just happened just before the final battle, but I'm kind of used to it. Didn't bother me that much. I think this is the most fun and the most enjoyment I've gotten out of a Doctor Who episode in a very long time.
And who's your MVP of the episode?
Oh, Neil Patrick Harris. For all the reasons Emma said, he lit up this episode. Really hope we get to see more of him. Really didn't feel like he was completely banished. So I'm looking forward to seeing him at least once more. One thing I did want to briefly mention about Shooty's performance, and I mention this because you mentioned this and I'm in total agreement. The idea that Shooty was overshadowed in any way, I think is totally disproven by the episode itself, because he shows up and becomes a main character. Tennant becomes a supporting character. Like, he hasn't found the character yet. No one does immediately. It usually takes him a year. Like, I don't think Shooty will find it at Christmas either. It usually takes a series before they really find their way and they can kind of speak Doctor. Much like Tennant, it reminded me of Tennant in the Christmas Invasion, where it was just so much personality and energy, and again showing up in the back end of the episode, that he totally dominated the screen. It changes the whole tenor and energy of the episode. Everything about the episode changes. And in a way, it's like the first 2/3 of the episode felt like a satire of social media and the COVID vaccine. And then the rest of the episode was through like upbeat Doctor Who tinted spectacles the second Shooty shows up. There's one thing that he also does. Emma, are you still here? Is Emma gone?
Yeah, I was going to say, I've got to sort of go now.
Okay, and obviously thanks for make it available, Emma. I'm sure obviously we'll be calling on you when the new series is back in the spring.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks for chatting, everybody. Nice to talk to you.
Bye, love.
Nice
Always fun to share a mic with you.
Yeah, bye.
Unfortunately, Emma's had to go because there's one reference that she will get with the catch scene. At one point, the Toymaker taunts Shooty's Doctor with the gold tooth, and Shooty's basic response is to what we would call over here kissing his teeth. He's not literally kissing them. It's kind of when you almost suck in the air through your top lip, and what that is a very specific thing of people of Caribbean descent and maybe African descent do as well. And it's an expression of like disdain and derision and disrespect. And it's the kind of thing, as a kid, you never, ever, ever, I cannot emphasize this enough, ever did around your parents. My mum would probably rather I swear at her than kiss my teeth. On pain of death, you did not do this. He hasn't been here long, but this black doctor's already shown how black he is. This will mean nothing, probably will mean nothing to African Americans either, to be honest. I cannot emphasize how specifically black British that is as a response. It was half a second, but if you watch the episode back, they're doing the catch, Toymaker shows his tooth, and then Shooty's reaction is to kind of screw his face up, and he kisses his teeth. And I don't even think that the closed captioning got it right, because they don't recognise it, because they don't understand the cultural reference. That is a very, very specific culturally black thing he did, and I refuse to believe that was on the script. I am certain that Shooty said, that is what I'm going to do.
Maybe no one else even knew what he was doing, and that just...
Maybe no one else did.
You just thought he made a face?
I saw it immediately and was just like, that is a very specific culturally black thing.
I know that one of the things that Shooty has said in interviews is that in his head, this doctor is very black, and I think that's great. I want to see more of that.
Jen, is there any observations that you missed out on? Because we'll whip through those and let's do RVPs and then we'll finish.
I did like the episode. I feel like I didn't need these 3 specials. My life has not changed because of them. They were enjoyable, but I am really, really excited from Christmas onward because I've been a fan of Shooty's from the first moment that I started watching Sex Education. So when he was announced as a doctor, I basically lost my mind in a good way. I want things to shake up. I want more diversity. I mean, I hate to sound like, your typical white liberal. I'm really happy about representation, and I just think Shooty is such an excellent actor. He is the right person for the job right now, and I can't wait to see what he does. I'm really impressed with Millie and everything that I've read, and it just blows my mind that she's all of 18. I think she's awesome. The 2 of them together seem to have really great chemistry. I think the MVP, like everybody else, I think Neil Patrick Harris just stole everything. I really hope at some point we will see him again. I would have loved to see more of a Toymaker and whatever he was planning. And he did say at the end that his legions are coming, so there will be a connection to him in future. And I'm assuming that Jinx Monsoon's character and Indira Varma's character may be connected to that. We see him, even if it's a flashback or something like that, that would be really groovy. I was cynical and whatever, but I'm very, very optimistic about the future.
Quick couple of things we haven't mentioned, and these are little things. RTD said he's not a fan of multi-doctor stories to resolve problems. So generally speaking, he says, I shouldn't believe him. He preempted the very good scene when Kate Leshbury Stewart turns her Z-Deck off and then starts shouting at everyone and goes at Shirley for I've seen you walk, you in that wheelchair. 2 weeks ago, we had a real person, going at the actor because she's crossing her legs at one point in a scene with David Tennant, saying, why does she need a wheelchair if she can cross her legs? They filmed this a year ago, and it, in a timey-wimey way, preempted that kind of ableism on social media towards the actual actor, Ruth Madeley. Quite clear that he's been thinking of this mindset for a while. The unit guns, useless as always. RTD still very much anti-Second Amendment. And the budget, as good as the budgets are, there were a couple of scenes that they were changed because of budgets. The second TARDIS, which is still the TARDIS, but the mallet, the Toymaker's mallet, he said, RTD, that he originally planned it to be unpacking a cardboard box. He said that's what the scene was going to be, and then someone went, can't afford that, Russell, just give him a hammer. So they went with that.
That sounds like it was the same effect that they used with the buildings folding up in 1925, and then also when the Toymaker left.
Yes, kind of that. They said, we got to use a hammer, and a similar thing with when Tennant realises what's happening with the Giggle and Stooky Bill, he turns all the screens on in unit. He said it was what he wrote was every television in London was going to turn on with that image. It was going to beam up that image, and then there would be a giant Stooky Bill giggling away, and Tennant would be on the helipad in unit facing this massive image looking at it. And it sounds actually really good on paper, but again they went, can't afford that, Russell, just put it on some screens. So they've still got more money, but not unlimited. And the only thing just to mention before my MVP, I feel very strongly about this. So at the end, they're having their lunch, Tennant's doctor's kind of retired, and then Mel comes in with whatever she's brought. She said something along the lines, oh, the door's unlocked, you don't mind? And they're like, no, come sit down. This is a house, not a flat or an apartment. It's a house in the suburbs. Maybe in what you would know as the projects, houses might be unlocked because a load of kids are in everyone else's house going from house to house. That might happen. In the suburbs, no one's house is unlocked. You can't just walk into people's houses. That's not happening. My door is not unlocked right now. I feel confident saying the same for you two both. I'm sure Emma's door is also locked. No one can just walk into Ember's house. No one can walk into mine. No one can walk into either of yours. The idea that the door's unlocked. There were some fantastical, absurd things in this episode, but nothing stretched credulity more than the idea that you can just walk into someone's semi-detached house on a suburban street in the UK anywhere. That's when the episode does jump the shark.
Damn, I'm not a fan anymore now.
So no.
I live in the suburbs in New York, and usually our doors are locked too. But the only thing in my head is like maybe they kind of knew that people were stopping by and they were having this luncheon.
I don't think that's like, oh yeah, dropping a line saying, oh yeah, we were expecting you, but no, the door was unlocked. Fuck off.
To jump in on MVP, also, I think Mel was an MVP because, again, being old school, I mean, Melanie Bush was one of the most useless companions ever. And the fact that she was so good in this, and I'm really excited to see Bonnie in the future, that's something I never thought I'd say before. So she was awesome.
Bonnie Langford said herself being interviewed, I finally get to use a computer. Mel's a computer program. I never touched a computer once.
Right.
Back in the day. Yes, it is very much that. So much about Russell's return feels like second chances and fixing things he may think needs fixing, even if other people think they didn't. And if we just end on my MVP, which is, I actually give it to David Tennant again for a third week in a row. I don't have any objection with Neil Patrick Harris or anything. And Ncuti, you could argue he steals the episode, but we don't have a category for scene stealer, and we just don't have the time to add one. But I thought Tennant was very good in those first 2/3. He's not the same as the 10th. This Doctor is riven with a lot of self-doubt.
I played a game and let him in. An elemental force with the power of a god and has driven the human race mad with a puppet.
Yeah, but you always say...
Oh, what do I say? What do I say? What do I say? Because I'm always so certain. I'm all Sonic and TARDIS and Time Lord. Take that away. Take away the toys. What am I? What am I now?
And Donna says, and I think this comes from Tennant's performance, Donna says the Doctor's staggering along, which maybe is also the same for this particular modern version of the show. Rick, you said New Who earlier. I don't think we can call this New Who anymore, because New Who is what we're getting from Christmas. That is now Series 1. We have now a tile of sorts called Whoniverse on BBC iPlayer, just devoted to Doctor Who. It has tons of Doctor Who stuff past and present on there. But on there it has one section that's Doctor Who 1963 to whenever the show stopped. I've forgotten. Whenever it was. And then there's another section that says Doctor Who 2005 to 2022. That is Christopher Eccleston to Jodie Whittaker, and that is it. And there's another section that says Doctor Who 2023 and then to present day. That's the Star Beast on. This is Series 1 now. This or Season 1, as you call it. This is now Season 1. This is how people are going to be introduced to the show on Disney. It's a brand new show. It's still the same show, but it's very much like Christopher Eccleston starting from scratch with Rose. That's what Ncuti's first episode is going to be.
I mean, I don't want to call it the Disney era, but in a way it is the Disney era, because you can call it the streaming era. I mean, every time you get a new Doctor and a new showrunner, you do get some kind of turnover, and it's a good jumping in point, and you get like a soft reboot. But this is much more demarcated as a reboot.
Christopher Eccleston's not New Who anymore. It might make us feel old, but ultimately this is trying to save the show for a new generation of fans. We'll end there. If you have any thoughts on all of what we've spoken about, which is plenty, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com, and we're on Twitter and Instagram at analysingdw. So we'll say bye on behalf of Emma. Jan, Rick, thank you for both making the time.
Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for asking me again.
And thank you for listening. And we will be back in the new year to analyse the church on Ruby Road. Until next time. Our logo is courtesy of Scott Mattison. His work can be found at planetrisecreative.com and on Twitter at planetrise. Our theme tune is by Mike Mould. We can be reached at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com and on Twitter at analysingdw.